Okay, we're looking at Genesis 14, and before we get there, I want to let me pull up one of our old maps here. I think it's up here. Yeah, this might work for us, I guess. But just a little setup. So if you remember the breakdown of Genesis is there are two real parts to Genesis. The first part is Genesis 1 to 11, which covers the what's called the prehistory. It's all the setup and the context for it. And so if you remember how it goes, we began with creation, and out of the chaos, out of the darkness, the void, the emptiness, God brings forth goodness and light and life and gives dominion to the man. And then we're told one story after another in Genesis 1 to 11 of really the depravity of man. So let's kind of recount those. What's the first fall that we see in the book of Genesis? What's the scenery, if you remember?
In the Garden of Eden, Eve falling for the lies of the serpent as to that she could be like God if she ate of the fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just Eve, of course. Adam
Right.
is right there with her, and it's this rebellion, and it's not just a physical rebellion of mankind, it's a spiritual rebellion, as the serpent is the cherub. He's a cherub in the garden who forsakes his post and rebels, and instead of protecting and upholding the humans that are made in God's image, he seeks to tempt them and lead them to their destruction. That's the first fall. We have another fall that happens later on in Genesis 6. After that fall, we have, of course, the murder of Abel, and then the depravity of man, and then we get to another scene in Genesis 6. And what happens there, if you recall, in Genesis 6?
The Nephilim.
Yeah, tell me that story. You know how that goes?
Well, the sons of God found the human women attractive and came down to earth and made them their wives, took who they chose. And God's distaste for this, he cursed them that any of their children would be born as giants.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
interpretation of that. But the whole phrase, the sons of God, take, as you saw in the Garden of Eden, the woman takes something that's good, but that's not for her, and the man takes that which is not for them, but it is good. A trespass here. They cross the line. We see that again in Genesis 6. We have the sons of God, and however you want to interpret it, it's another crossing of a line here, taking something that is not for them. So the sons of God see the daughters of men and take them for their own. And that's described in a wicked way. And so I think I've mentioned before, I preached that sermon in completely contradicting myself when I've done it twice, but that whether it's the godly line, the sons of Seth, or these are angelic beings doing this, they're trespassing, they're crossing another boundary. There is another fall that happens here, leading to the depravity, leading to the flood, and then we have this cleansing. Wonderful. Until after the flood, there's another fall, and that's a very significant one for our story today. What happens after the flood? Um, Another, in a sense, fall from grace here.
Noah.
Yeah, what
When
happened with Noah?
So Noah got into the wine, and he was in his tent naked, and one of his sons, Ham, saw him and disrespected him, and it was a punishment to Ham.
Yeah. And so it's not the fall of Noah. He's lying naked in his tent, drunk. It's really the fall of Ham and Canaan, as he does the wicked act of seeing his father's shame and entering into seeing it, coming into the tent, and then further exposing it. Whereas Shem and Japheth then cover his shame. And there's a curse that happens to Canaan, who is the son of Ham. And we talked about that, why God doesn't curse, why Noah doesn't curse Ham. Remember why Noah curses Canaan instead of Ham? What it was? Well, it's it's the father-son link here. So there's a union of father and son. So that to curse the son is to curse the father too. And there's this union there. So Noah, if he curses Ham, it's a curse upon himself because Ham is his son. Curses Canaan, it's a curse upon Ham, and that doesn't reflect him. That's why God, for example, remember, why doesn't he divide? Solomon does a great evil, but he doesn't take the kingdom from Solomon. He waits for his son to come along. Remember why that was?
Well, because of Solomon, he still, the line still retains a piece.
Yeah, it wasn't Solomon. It was because of David. Because of David. So
because of David.
yeah, so Solomon has committed idolatry, and God is furious with him, and he says, however, for David's sake, I'm not going to take the kingdom from you. I'm going to take it from your son. So there's that kind of that principle there. So anyway, but we have this split up, and again, here's that map of the descendants. We have the orange in the map are the descendants of Ham, and this is, remember, this is the sort of the cursed line. This is the line of the enemies, and then the descendants of Shem is the purple here, and then the green are the descendants of Japheth, which is kind of up in these areas here. But you'll notice that most of the battles in the scriptures that we're going to see are between Shem and the line, the descendants of Ham. I mean, Egypt becomes a great enemy of the faith. The Canaanites, also from Ham. And even down here in these areas, Havilah down the Persian Gulf, Nimrod is the builder of Babylon and Nineveh. These are also great enemies, great powers. So that's sort of the setup. And so then after that, we have, of course, the Tower of Babel and the scattering of the nations, and another rebellion happens. And it's a dark place. In that context, now God, this mess of a world, scattered and cursed, going after other gods, just the wickedness abounding, God begins now his mission of salvation in choosing one man, Abram, out of Ur, which I believe on our map here would be, let me find another map to see a little bit
There's
better.
one thing that when we're talking about this area that always seems to strike me, this connection with Adam and Eve. They didn't even know they were naked until after they took of the fruit. And then all of a sudden that was a problem. And before that, it wasn't even an issue.
Yeah.
Now in the case with Noah, it's being seen naked is a big problem.
Yeah, it's a shame. This is the price of sin. And the funny thing is, you see this in every child. There's a certain point when a child becomes aware of his nakedness. Now it's funny, the little kids, they know they're naked, but they're not ashamed. I remember so many times, like Daniel will be running around naked boy, he just that kind of thing. They're just not ashamed. They're not thinking about that. But then something happens, and they switch is flipped, and they suddenly realize their shame and their nakedness and their insecurities abound. And yeah, that's exactly what happens with Adam and Eve. And then Noah, you see that too. It's his shame to be naked, and the need now to be covered. The need for us to be covered and clothed. Yeah, Elizabeth.
And in light of what you were saying, even as children grow up, like you say, they're not ashamed. And then there's a certain point where, I had friends when we were in college, and the daughter was fine in having her dad give her bath at night until she was about 5.
Yeah.
And then she wanted mom.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
they notice the difference,
Oh yeah.
and it's perfectly natural, but it's all because of the shame, and dad had to realize.
Of course.
Yeah, and the same thing with the sons. At some point, they want their dad to take care of them, not their mom.
So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is that that's the result of sin and shame, and
right.
The idea is that we can't. The solution is not for us to say it's not a problem and to run around naked again. The solution is that we understand we need proper clothing. And in regard to our faith, that's exactly what the gospel offers, the clothing of Christ. He covers us, he covers our shame. as we see throughout. So we come now to the journeys of Abraham. So God calls Abram out of Ur, remember here, back in chapter 12, and says, go to the land I promised, and he travels up all the way from Ur. You can see this is the Fertile Crescent here. It goes all the way up to Haran with his father and what was his nephew and his wife, Sarah. And then after, I believe after Terah dies, he goes now down to, God calls him into Canaan land, and he goes here. That was chapter 12. And then we saw in chapter 12, the first test of his faith. If you remember the first test of it, the promise to Abraham was three things. What were the three things God promised to Abraham?
Land, to make you a great nation,
Mhm.
and all the world will be
Descendants.
blessed through you.
Yes, the land, the descendants, and the blessing. You're going to be a great nation. Many people are going to come from you. I'm going to give you this land, and you're going to bless all the world. It's going to be blessed through you, and I will bless you. All right, so those three things. And then all of a sudden, the first test happens. What happens that takes away, in a sense, all three of those things? What happens in Genesis chapter 12? You remember?
Pharaoh steps into the picture and takes Sarah.
Yeah, what does he do? How does he even get to Egypt with Pharaoh? How does that situation
A famine. There was a famine.
Yeah, so there's a famine in the land, which is a sign of a curse, not a blessing.
Mm.
And that famine drives him from the land. So that's the second thing. He loses the land. And then Pharaoh takes his wife. So he has the prospect of being a great nation is in danger too. All three of those things taken to real test now. And then the Lord brings it all back through plagues, through direct intervention, and brings Abraham back in the land. And the first test happens now. Genesis 13, which we discussed last week, there's a second test coming forward here. What was that? What was the challenge of Genesis 13? We talked about that last week. Has to do with his nephew, with Lot.
With, that when they, everything got they got too big for one area. And so, he gave Lot the choice of which way he wanted to go,
Mhm.
and he would go the other, and Lot chose east.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's interesting. Genesis 12, you have the test of faith coming from a famine. In Genesis 13, you have another test of faith coming from having too much stuff.
Yeah.
Where they have so much livestock and so much that the land is not big enough they have to part ways. Because their herdsmen are fighting with each other. And so Abraham proposes, and look at the proposal of faith. Like, do you just choose wherever you want to go? I'll go the other direction. Gives him first choice. Lot chooses to go towards Sodom. And why does he choose Sodom?
Look nice. The
Yeah.
Jordan Valley. But
Jordan Valley.
I thought that they're still both in Canaan.
So yeah, I think so. It's still, yeah, it would still be considered, I guess, Canaan land, but it's more toward away from it. It's in the eastern direction of it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's moving to the east. Abraham goes to the west, and again, that whole thing of moving eastward, it's always that sign. We're kind of moving in away from God's presence here. And Lot chooses it because it looks like Eden. It looks like the land of Egypt, flourishing places. Of course, the men of Sodom are there, and they are great sinners against the Lord, very wicked. So it's that tension of a beautiful place, but full of wickedness as well. So very desirous for the world, but opposed to the kingdom of God. Abram goes in the other direction, and God reaffirms his promise. All the land you will see is be yours forever. So that's where we left off last time. Now we have another test coming, and this is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty remarkable story in Genesis 14. So that's what we're going to pick up today. I need someone. I'm going to pick on you, Rob Roy, if you don't mind reading some crazy names here.
I knew it.
14.
I looked at the first couple of verses and I had sucker all over my forehead.
So Genesis 14. Let's start there. This is This is like the war that breaks out now. So if you want to start with verses 1 to 7.
Good. In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Guim, these kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zebulun, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these.
We'll stop right there. Let's get our forces down. So there's a war happening now. This is the war.
Yeah.
So this is the war. And so we have on one side, we have what, the 4 kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go through these again one more time. Who are the 4?
Is it, you want the countries or the people? Oh.
Put the names and the countries here. So we've got Amraphel, is that right?
Yes.
King of Shinar.
Okay, of Shinar. I'm going to put the countries in all capitals and the kings in regular case here. So
I believe that was another name for Babylon, wasn't it?
I have a map. We'll take a look at it in a second. Let's take a look. What's the next one?
Arioch?
Arioch. And that's the king of Elasar. Again, when you read it, like these names don't mean anything to us, but when you start seeing how it plays out, it's a pretty amazing scene. What's the next one?
Chedorlaomer.
Yeah, Chedorlaomer. And he's the king of Elam. And then Tidal, king of
Goen.
Go on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So those are your 4 kingdoms, and they make war versus these are the 5 and I believe these are cities, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So it's not, this is not, it looks like 4 against 5. That sounds like like the 5 is the advantage, but these are 4 kingdoms going against 5 cities. And so we have in our scene here,
Bera, king of Sodom.
Bera is the king of Sodom. Okay. Then we have Bersha,
King of Gomorrah.
Okay. So Sodom, so we know Sodom and Gomorrah are 2 cities.
Mhm.
Then we got what, Shinab,
King of Admah.
Okay. Shemeber of Zeboim, and Bela of Zoar. Okay. So if we take a look at what this looks like, I'm going to pull down to our map here. And these are.
Is that last one right? Or I thought Bela was another name for Zoar.
Oh, king of.
Yes.
Oh, and thank you, Bela. We don't have the king's name, do we? Thank
No.
you. Okay, so Bela and Zoar. Okay. So if you look down here, so here are the 4 kingdoms we're dealing with here. Shinar, that seems to be that's Babylon. That's the Babylonian area.
Yeah.
Right there. Elam, is that like Persia area? That's the east there?
Persia is a little bit north, but close. Yeah.
Yeah, the Elasar is up by where the Assyrians would come from, around that area.
Hmm.
And then you got Goyim, the Hittites up here.
That's Turkey, isn't it?
Turkey. Yeah, that's Turkey right now. So, I mean, they're coming a long distance, as you can see here. And these have to be major forces coming against. And then they're coming into this area here, right around here is where all these cities are. Sodom and Gomorrah, somewhere around here. We're not sure where these cities are, but all these cities are kind of in this location here. So the question first is why would they want to make war? Why would these nations want to travel all that distance to make war on these 5 cities in this area?
There had to be something they wanted there.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of valuable land there. I mean, that's the passage to get to Egypt and everywhere else is to go down along there.
Yeah, these are trade routes. There is great wealth, as you know, and that's what exactly the reason Lot moves there is the same reason they're about to attack. This is the Jordan Valley. It's like the Garden of Eden. It's lush and flourishing. There's a lot of wealth there. And in fact, I think what they do is they don't necessarily take it and settle the land. They kind of take it and then they take people captive and bring them back with them, and they take all their goods. So it's like a raiding party in a sense. So this is our scene here. This is a pretty intense, overwhelming force coming down upon this. The way it's described, if you don't know anything about these places, it just sounds like it's two, it's four nations against five nations, but it's not. This is far worse than like Russia invading Ukraine or like China invading Taiwan, kind of a thing. It's a big deal what's happening here. So these are powerful forces at work, great test. And so let's pick it up from there. Verse 3, we'll gonna turn it over to you, Elizabeth, here, see how your reading skills are. If you want to take verses 3 down to 7.
Okay. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karanam, the Zuim in Ham, the Eman in Shaveh, Kirithaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazon Tamar.
All right. So if we can kind of weed through all the names here, I'm not going to try to figure out where these places are. What's your impression so far of this war?
Sounded like they had one leader and all of a sudden it started breaking up.
All right. So we'll start with verse 3, right? It says they joined forces and they who are they referring to?
I think
The
that's-
four kingdoms.
Yeah, those kings we mentioned.
The four kingdoms, yeah.
Okay, I think it's the four kingdoms here. They joined forces in the Salt Sea, that's the Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's at that time it's the Valley of Siddim.
Mm.
So this is all happening before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So things looked a lot different back then. Joined forces in the Valley of Siddim, which is the Dead Sea now. And for 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer. So those 5 cities had served. So Chedorlaomer, who is the leader of
Elam.
Elam. Is that right?
Yeah.
Elam. That's the great power. That would have been the most powerful force there. And they had served him for how long was it? Chedorlaomer?
12 years.
Yeah.
For 12 years. But then they rebel. And so once they rebel, now we need to shut this down. And so they come in. He comes with the kings, defeats them. And how does this battle even look? Is it a close fight? Is it what did we get a sense here how things went? Well,
It doesn't look like it was close at all.
No.
yeah,
They're all over
they have their way with them, basically. They came in, they defeat the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim and Ham. They defeat all these folks in the Horites in the hill country, even the border of the wilderness. And then they turned back and they came to En Mishpat, that's Kadesh, and they defeated all the country of the Amalekites. They just have total control. They defeated them thoroughly. So it's not even close. So that's the kind of, so that's, you're already getting a sense right now that the force, the overwhelming force that is coming in now.
Mm,
Let's pick it up here. Now this is, you can see the danger here that's happening because of the area that all this is going on. This is, once again, the promise of God is in danger
mm,
because they're coming in and wiping out all these nations around them. And Lot is right there in Sodom, and Abram is not that far away. This is a great danger now for them all, having these invading powerful forces coming in, and Abram could easily be taken away, and Lot taken away, and that's the end of God's plan of salvation. So
And if
let's
they're in there pillaging, both of them have so much to lose that would be a big target.
absolutely, absolutely. So let's pick it up here. It looks like it's getting a little easier reading here. By the way, Elizabeth, thank you. It was a great job on the reading there.
you're welcome.
Jack, you want to get the next section here, 8 to 12 for us? Is that big enough?
Sure. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined the battle in the valley of Siddim with Laomer, king of Elam, the title king of Goim, Araphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasah, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all of their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way.
All right, so we have first the empire strikes and takes over the region, and then the 5 kings come, and so this is the resistance of the 5 kings against them. But what happens in this resistance? They meet them, they join the valley for battle, and what happens to them all here?
But the resistors lose.
Yeah, the rebels lose bad. Lose, and they are running. It's really kind of humiliating here how it ends up.
They fell into tar pits.
Yeah, they run away and fall into tar pits.
Mm,
They flee
Must
to
be like tarred and feathered. It's not a
Yeah.
good deal.
yeah, just kind of a horrible thing. So the enemy, so basically they take all the possessions. So it ends with the final result of this is what?
Lot gets captured.
Yeah. So the enemy, that would be the 4 kingdoms, take possession of, take all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah, and of course, they also take Lot, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions. Okay. And they went their way. Okay. So it's a pretty dire scene here. Very interesting already with this first choice. You know, Abraham and Lot part ways. Lot goes to the Garden of Eden to the east, but it's not the promised land. It's away from the land that God has promised them. It's toward the east, even though it's beautiful, it's lavish, it's lush, it's very wealthy. Lot moves there. Abraham moves in the other direction, away from that. God meets Abraham and blesses him and reminds him of his promise. All this will be yours. And then the next scene with Lot is that wonderful land is just, he's attacked and taken, and he's now held captive and prisoner, taken away. So it's a pretty bad situation for Lot right now. So let's pick it up from there, 13 to 16. Bob Fowler, you want to get that for us? Okay, Is that big enough for you?
Then one who had escaped, yep, that's fine. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram, the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were the allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. They were brought back, and then he brought back all the possessions and also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions and the women and the people.
All right. So we have an escapee here who goes to Abram. And by the way, how is Abram described to us here in verse 13?
The Hebrew.
The Hebrew.
The Hebrew, right? You know what that means, the Hebrew? You know why it's called the Hebrew?
Well, you said that name in the line of
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Shem.
Yeah. What was that, Claudette?
Was it Shem?
That makes him a Semite, would be a Shem.
yeah.
He's a descendant of Shem, so he's a Semite. But a Hebrew he's a descendant of Eber.
Hebrew, yeah. Mhm.
Oh, that's right.
If you remember those genealogies, it was Shem and Eber who basically, I think, outlive everybody. They're so they're the prominent names in that. So he's known as a Hebrew here. That's where you get the term from. He's living by the oaks of Mamre. So Mamre is an ally of Mamre is an Amorite. I think he mentioned in the last scene how he defeated the Amorites were defeated, weren't they? If I remember. We had up here. Oh, the Amalekites, and they also defeated the Amorites. Yeah, so they had come in, they defeated the country, the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who were dwelling. So the Amorites were also defeated during that war. One of those Amorites is an ally of Abraham, so he's a friend. Okay.
Interesting, because these kings are coming from multiple directions.
Yeah.
And my first thought is, how did he know which direction, Lot went? When you're trying to rescue somebody, you got to figure out where he is first.
Yeah. Well, he knows that they're going back because they have to go. He knows it's going to be north because they're all coming from, no matter where they're coming from, they have to come down from the north. So there's no crossing the desert. So he's got to go north. So he's going to chase them all the way up to Damascus.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Long way. He's down here, and he's going to chase him all the way up to here. But now look at this is an incredible story because Abraham now hears that his kinsman has been taken, and Abram leads. What does he take?
318 men. Doesn't sound like a lot against.
No. Are these, what are these, Navy SEALs? What's going on?
Yeah.
318 trained men.
That's 18 more than Gideon had.
Yeah. Over his house. And then what does he do? He pursues them as far. So he pursues up to Dan. So Dan is let's see where Dan is. I think Dan is like up here in this area. I think it's in around the area of Galilee. I think it's right up around here.
Yep.
Where Dan is. So he pursues him up to here. And then he
Up to Hobah, right?
what does he do when he gets up to Dan?
He divides.
I mean, what's there to divide? He's only got 318 men.
I
So
know.
Abraham divides his forces by night, and then attacks and defeats them. And this is an incredible victory. When you think about
Mm.
this is a phenomenal victory. I mean, there was that movie, The 300. You remember that story of the 300? Was it the oh gosh, not the Greeks, the Spartans, the 300 Spartans that withstood against the
Athens.
Persians when they came, and the 300 men, they blocked the pass, they defended the pass, and
yeah.
they all died, but they actually had a momentary victory there. This is even more amazing. I mean, he attacks with 318, perhaps catching them surprised, but even surprised or not, it's like this is an incredible victory that he can do that. And then he chases them,
Mm.
and pursues them north of Damascus. This is an unbelievable. This is the kind of victory that God would be giving the Israelites when they came into the land of Canaan under Joshua.
Mm.
Kind of victory when they're going as overwhelming forces and odds, but the Lord is with them, clearly showing the Lord is with Abram. God is doing this. This is not Abram. This is impossible. I don't care how great these warriors are. This is impossible, and he does it.
What does it mean to be born in his house?
They would have been so Abram, as he's going along, he gains possessions and he gains servants. Some of them would be indentured servants that would be serving for him, and when he goes to Egypt. So as he gets bigger and bigger flocks and herds, he has herdsmen, he has all kinds of people working for him and living with him. And these are those whom he didn't take on as adults. They were actually born while they were on serving in his household. So to say, he didn't have a house. Remember, he's living in tents.
Right.
No
But-
man.
And it's not his family, but it's his greater family, I guess.
Yeah, it's those who are connected to him. So I mean, so when you think about that, if he's got 318 men who are born, he's like a traveling city. This
Mm.
guy, it's like he's got to have a couple thousand people attached to him traveling with him.
And these are his trained men, so I'm guessing that knowing that he's got value, he's trained people to protect it.
Yeah, yeah. These would be trained, so he needs to. It really becomes like it almost is like he becomes like a portable town moving about
Mm.
the country, and he's traveling from place to place. But he's kind of like what Israel will do with millions in the wilderness. Abraham will do with maybe a couple thousand. And he's got different roles, and it's a pretty remarkable. It's a lot bigger scene than we thought it was, isn't it? I mean, you think of Abraham all by himself with just Sarah. It's like he's got a pretty big company there. So,
Yeah.
All right, let's. Sorry about the interruption there. All right, so he defeats them, pursues them north of Damascus, and then what?
He
Abram
brought back everything, including Lot and his
Lot and his
possessions,
possessions.
and the women and people.
brings back
Mm.
everything. Lot, the women, people,
Possessions.
everything's restored.
Everything.
All right. And so in a sense, we see here a fulfillment of God's promise to Abram. If you remember, what was the promise, the first promise he gave to Abram? We talked about, he promised, I'll make your name great. You'll be a great nation. I will bless you. But there was one more thing he said along with that blessing. Remember how he phrased it?
Land.
He will give him the land, but he says it with the blessings. I will bless you.
Okay.
And what does he
Bless
say?
those who bless you.
I will bless those who bless you and
Curse those who curse you.
curse those who curse you. And all nations will be blessed through you. And here you have a scene here where these 5 kings, as great as they were, these 4 kings and these 4 kingdoms, were doing something like Pharaoh did in Egypt, cursing Abram, putting him under threat, threatening him or threatening his family, in particular Lot in this case. and they are in a sense under curse. And the way the battle is described is pretty clear. This is the Lord doing this.
Mhm.
The Lord who directly afflicted Pharaoh with plagues, because he did that to Abram, taking his wife. He now will to the powers in the land of Canaan, he will afflict them so that a small army will overwhelm them and take everything back. Now, I want you to see this. This is a preview of the Exodus story. Can you see it? How God, when the people of Israel were in Egypt, oppressed by Pharaoh, God rescued them by what? How did he do it? If you remember, it was plagues,
Yeah.
right? Just like what we saw in chapter 12. God rescues Abram through plagues when he's in Egypt. Then when they come to the promised land under Joshua, they take the land by virtue of an army fighting against overwhelming giants and huge forces, but the Lord is with them, and they take possession of the land by virtue through them. The same thing here. It's like God doesn't send plagues upon the kings, but he rather empowers Abram and his small forces to come and take back everything that is rightfully theirs. So it's kind of a preview of what's to come later on with the story of the Israelites, how he leads them out of Egypt and how he gives them the land of Canaan, the two means he uses for that. So
Would there be any significance to the fact that it says, and he divided his forces against them by night? I feel like there's other stories in scripture where there was something about battle or something by night.
yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Well, yeah, the one where they broke the jars and they all fought against each other, that was in the night.
Oh, was that Gideon at night? They had the torches. They have to be at night. They have the torches,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah, that was a night battle too, and that set them into confusion, and they turned against each other. It is interesting though that he does it, that this great victory happens in the night, when you would think that the forces of darkness have the upper hand at night, and God shows his sovereignty over the day and the night. He comes and wins on their home turf. This is their Abraham comes, and it's like Jesus saying, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against us. He goes on the offense. He's going to the gates of hell. He's not defending against the hordes of hell. He is taking the battle to the gates of hell. And so we see this incredible scene of, and I think maybe that's some significance there, Claudette, of that
Did
is.
the Israelites flee from Pharaoh at night? For some reason, I feel that. I remember that. Maybe not.
Into that one.
They
That's
didn't in the movie.
okay. So there you go.
Well, I didn't see the movie.
Well, they ate it. They had to eat in haste. That's a good question. If I have to look into that one here. Maybe.
What's the question?
What time did the Israelites leave Egypt during the Exodus? So if I'm looking at my Bible here, and the institution of the Passover.
Well, the Passover was in the evening because they were eating the evening meal.
Yeah.
But they were dressed to leave right away.
Say what you came. Okay.
Didn't it say that they were not to keep anything over for the next morning?
They were to they were to eat it all. And they land, there shall be no more case of the consequence of the firstborn. I'm just looking at when the Lord brings. That's a good question about the timing of things. It's really interesting.
It seems to me, I think they had to leave in a hurry because they didn't have time for the bread to rise. That's why you get the unleavened bread.
Yep.
Passover.
All right.
Passover is at nighttime.
So I'm reading Exodus 12, verse 30. It says, "And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel, go serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks, your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. So yeah, that happens at night. And so I think you're right. I think they, it seems to suggest that they left. Why would they wait in the middle of the night? He sends them off. So interesting. So great. All right, let's finish up the chapter and pick it from here. So let's do this here. Bob Thomas, would you get the next section here? Let's do verses 17 down to 20, just that part.
Okay. After this, he returned from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. The king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shava, that is the king's valley, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand.
And then the last section there, and Abram.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything.
Okay, so now this is after the defeat of Chedorlaomer. Okay. There are two kings mentioned in this scene here. The first one, and then when we read the rest of the paragraph, the second king we'll talk about in a minute. So who are the two kings that we're introduced to here that are interacting with Abram here, that meet him?
Chedorlaomer and Melchizedek.
No, Chedorlaomer is defeated. He's not the one.
Oh, the king of
The
Sodom.
king of Sodom.
Who was the king of Sodom? What was his name? Do you remember? Meet Abram. There is, coming back up here, Bera.
Bera.
Okay. All right. So first off is Bera, king of Sodom. And the second is Melchizedek,
King of Salem.
of Salem. All right. So let's talk about, we've already seen King of Sodom a little bit here. The King of Salem. What is Salem? Where's that?
Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's Jerusalem. That's a precursor of Jerusalem. And so we have here a couple things said about this Melchizedek. So what does Melchizedek do? Let's talk about him.
Brings out bread and wine.
Well, let's start with who is he? Who is he? What does he say about him?
Priest of God Most High.
So he's the priest of God Most High. What is the significance of that Most High? What's the meaning of that? Why is he called priest of God Most High?
God of everything.
Yeah. So if you remember, we have this concept of the gods. All these nations have gods of all sorts. There's Baal, there's Zeus, there's all sorts of different gods and every nation has their own gods. And we believe, as people who believe the Bible, that these are real beings. They are the fallen principalities, the powers of the heavenly realm. These are spiritual rebels against the holy God, and they have claimed the nations, and they sort of own these nations, and they and all these people honor these lesser gods. And so when Melchizedek comes on the scene, he really distinguishes him from all the other priests. There's all kinds of priests in the land around the world. Every god has their priests. But Melchizedek is identified. He's the priest of the one true God, the God Most High, above all, the creator of all the gods. And so Melchizedek constantly references God Most High. That's how he understands who the Lord is. We know from his time with Abram and as we read the scriptures, especially when he appears to Moses, that this is the Lord, Yahweh, that the Lord Yahweh, he is the God Most High. Melchizedek presents God Most High, and he is devoted to the one true God. And notice how he's described. He says, priest of God Most High, and the God Most High is what? What does he say about blessed be the God Most High?
Possessor of earth.
He's the possessor of heaven and earth. That is an astounding statement at this time, because that's not how any of the other gods would have been known and understood. You know, Zeus is the possessor of the clouds and the thunder in the heavens. Hades is the possessor of the underworld. Poseidon is the possessor of the seas, and you have all these other, each of these gods has their own little segment that they would own, but the God Most High is the possessor of all, of heaven and earth. So this is a remarkable scene. This
is clearly the same God that Abram has been dealing with through this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're dealing with the one true God, and Abram's coming out of a place where there are just millions of gods that we're dealing with, competing for attention. And what makes Abram so different from everyone else is that he is devoting himself to the one true God and over against all the other gods that are imposters. He's the possessor of heaven and earth. And what else do they say about the God Most High? Is the second thing he says.
Who has delivered you from your enemies into your hand.
Yeah, God Most High has delivered your enemies into your hand. It's he can see what happened there, that this is Abram does not win this battle because he is clever and has a powerful force at his disposal. He wins because God has delivered the enemies into his hands. It's the only way that happens. There's no way that he can defeat Chedorlaomer with 318 men. I'm sorry, there's no way that happens. And even more so, just chasing them. And at some point, you got to figure an army of 10,000 might turn around and say, hey, wait a minute, there's only a couple hundred guys there. Why are we running?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. It's like, this is only God can do that, which is really helpful to remember, especially when we feel overwhelmed by the forces of evil in the world. So that's the priest of God Most High. And what does he do? Melchizedek does a couple things in this scene here.
He brings out bread and wine.
He brings out bread and wine.
Which is probably the standard fare back then.
Yeah. And this is the representative of the fruit and the blessing and the fellowship. It's bread and wine. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
Isn't Christ also compared to Melchizedek?
Yes. He is a priest of the order of Melchizedek. Okay. And he explains in Hebrews why that's the case, because Melchizedek is of a great line, and you can see it in one of the cases he makes of how do you know Melchizedek is probably the most significant high figure in Genesis. It's what happens at the end of verse 20 that he makes the case.
Oh, because Abram gives him a tithe, and the lesser is the one who gives the tithe. The greater is the one who gives the blessing.
Yes, exactly right. So we know that Melchizedek is think about how great Abram is, and Abram, who plays a mediator in many ways, he now is given a mediator. He has this priest who is called Melchizedek. Remember what the name Melchizedek means?
King of righteousness.
Yeah. King of righteousness is Melchizedek. That's what the name means. And King of Salem means?
King of peace.
King of peace. And so this Melchizedek is so great that he is the mediator for Abram, who is God who is speaking face to face with Abram is now, there's this other person who is even higher than him. And so he's of an enormous status. He blesses him, brings out the bread and wine, blesses. So we can call this a fellowship meal. And he blesses Abram. And Abram gives him a tithe, gives him tribute, all of that. All right.
But see, even that, it's not like he gave him a tenth of his paycheck. He gave him a tenth of everything he had.
Mm,
That was a lot.
Yeah. No, it doesn't say. Yeah, that's a good question. Is it
Said a tenth of everything.
tenth of everything? Yeah. Is that a tenth of everything he brought back? Could be that maybe, or
Well, even if it was a tenth of everything he brought back everything Lot had.
this is true. This is true. It's a lot.
Yeah,
So he gives him a tenth of everything. Gives like a taxes here, but so that's Melchizedek's interaction with Abram. Now that's put up against the king of Sodom's interaction with Abram. Let's take a look at that. The king of Sodom. Where did we leave off here? Claudette, have you read yet? I can't remember. Verses 21 to 24.
And the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap of anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre take their share.
All right. So here's the offer. What is the king of Sodom? He makes an offer to Abram.
Give me the folks, you keep the stuff.
Yeah, give me the people. You take the goods. All right. Abram refuses this offer, which is a very generous offer. Refuses the offer. Why does he do it?
because he wants everyone to know that what he has come from God, not from man.
Exactly right. This is for Abram. It's not about collecting possessions. It's giving glory to God. So that this is about the glory of God, Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Notice that phrase comes up again.
Mm.
And earth. This is not, I will not take even a thread from you. He will not allow the king of Sodom to be his benefactor. Abram has one benefactor. That is God Most High.
Mm.
Not the king of Sodom. It's really interesting. This is a profound scene here. He says, I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten. I'll take that, make sure that they've eaten, and the share of the men who went with me, and then let the other guys who came along, let them take their share, but you are not going to be the one to make me rich. So all right. So another test of faith for Abram, and you'll notice the tests, how they come at him. The first part of it is from what is taken away from him. And he has to go and, by God's grace, find the courage to go pursue and to take back under the power of God. God has to deliver his, and he has to believe that God will deliver his enemies into his hands. And he does.
Mm.
And the second test comes, like we saw before, with prosperity. Now he's being tempted with prosperity of, will he allow a wicked king to have some leverage on him to be able to boast and say that I've made you rich? Or will he trust only in the blessings of God and not in the blessings of evil men? And Abram is a model of faith in both these scenes. So we see that kind of pattern happening here, where he's tested with severity and famine and defeats, and then he's tested with prosperity, and that brings its own troubles. And in each case, watch him closely. He responds with great faith, and we are to be inspired by him. So,
Mhm.
all right. Well, that wraps up chapter 14. Any comments or questions about our passage today? So, I added a little map down here so you can see your.
Do we know anything else about Melchizedek?
Yeah, there's other passages in scripture.
Just
Talks about-
from, yeah, the only references to Melchizedek is this passage here. That's all you're given.
Mm,
And then he's referenced in the Psalms when it says, I'll make you a priest in the order of Melchizedek. That's all it says there. And then Hebrews says a little bit about him, expounds a little bit on the meaning of his name.
and it doesn't, it say somewhere that he had no beginning and no end? Like,
So, it's the way they phrase it. It's
yeah,
the way the story presents him to us. There's no genealogy for him,
no,
which means that there is a priestly line that goes before the Levitical priests,
mm,
that precedes them, and that has no genealogy, so that you don't have to be related to Melchizedek by blood to
mm,
serve as a priest. Like the Levitical priest, you had to be born a Levite. And so
mm,
that's why Jesus could never be a priest as a Levite. But he can be of the order of Melchizedek, because we clearly see there is a priesthood that represents God Most High, that is higher than any of the Levites and any of the priests who would serve in the temple.
mm,
And Abram recognizes him as being this priest. It's not
Yeah.
like it's someone that he doesn't know already.
Yes, you'll notice how he despises the king of Sodom, but he gives honor to the king of Salem. So it's not Abram just bowing before kings. Goodness, he just defeated great kings. And then he refused another wealthy king, but this king he honors. There's something special about this king. So again, whether some people think that this might be the Son of God in human form, possible, or it could just be a great figure that is holding a position that we are to take note of. But either way, it's very clear Melchizedek is really important,
mm,
a really big deal, and that Abram, the man of faith, seeks God's blessing and finds blessing with God through this priest, not through Moses, not through Aaron and the Levites, but through this priest. Yeah, it's there's that should open up some doors for us. And so later on, when we get the prophecies of the Messiah, and it says that you will be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, that should tell you something right there. Okay. There is a mediator we need that is outside of the temple, outside of the sacrificial system and the Levites. There's another kind of priest that we are to be giving our attention to. And of course, that is who Jesus is. He is the priest, the high priest, in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Levi. This is his
Yeah.
order.
I feel like somewhere in the past I read where when they were trying to the commentary I read, I guess it was that to support that Melchizedek was not like a priest from the line what would become Levi, because where Abram gave to him the tithe to him, and then all his descendants would then have to follow suit, essentially. So
Yes.
the priests, the Levites, the people gave to the Levites of their share, right, of their food and stuff,
Yep.
because, right, and then so this puts a different spin on it, because essentially the Levites are giving to Melchizedek through Abram.
Yes, that's the point, isn't it? Yeah, he says that, Levi is still in Abram's loins when he's
Right.
giving to him. So it's like,
Mm.
if the order is that it's clear Melchizedek is greater than Abram, and Abram is clearly greater than Levi. So therefore, if I do my math correctly here, Melchizedek is far greater than Levi.
Mm.
So it's a higher priesthood, and yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So it's almost like taxation, isn't it? You have your state taxing you, and then your government, the federal government taxing you. And so this is a terrible analogy, but it's kind of like the Levites are your local taxing authorities, and Melchizedek is the government, the federal government, the much more powerful one that has the greater authority over it all. So
And it almost feels like Abram, when he gave Melchizedek 10%, it almost feels like it was more of his own possessions, because if he's not willing to take anything in his name from the king of Sodom, then he doesn't have anything from the spoils per se to give him.
that's interesting. Now keeping in mind, Abram, here's what it could be looking like is that Abram went out with his army, and then he defeats them, and then where did they meet? They met in the valley of Shava. That's the King's Valley. So Abram is there. He's not in his home. He's with his men in the King's Valley, and so he gave a tenth of all that he had with him.
Okay, yeah.
Place. So I think that maybe is what's going on here.
Okay, yep.
But yeah, or maybe a tenth of even all the possessions that he had taken back from Sodom, for all we know. But
I do find it amazing that Melchizedek, who surely is a picture of Christ in some capacity, as a type, comes out with bread and wine.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a foreshadowing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The other thing that strikes me, and maybe it's just that, again, they don't give you everything, but it was only the king of Sodom that came out. Where were the other three kings?
That's a good question. And let me see, when he came and defeated them, he divided his force against them, then he brought back all the possessions.
This group took everything from all
Yeah.
four of those cities, right?
It seems like they did. Sodom is probably the most important of those cities at that time, I'm guessing. I think Sodom is the most significant of those cities. But also the focus of the narrative is going to be on Sodom. Your mind is on Sodom. We talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, but the story really focuses on Sodom.
Yeah.
And so that the king of Sodom is the one that's being put up against him. It's possible the other guys were there too, but Moses wants us to think about this king as versus Melchizedek. So we have that juxtaposition of the king of righteousness, the king of peace versus the king of this world. And Abraham clearly is choosing sides. There's no question. I mean, he's honoring Melchizedek, and he is insulting the king of Sodom in what he says. So yeah. All right. Well, let's stop right here.